It's November 21st, 2024. This is the Committee of Precinct Chairs here at the Great Hall Meeting Room in Town Hall on Court Street. We are a hybrid meeting, so we also have members of the Committee of the Precinct Chairs joining us via Zoom, as well as some members of the public, as I see. As we do each meeting, I ask you to stand with me and do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. We're going to start also with the roll call, and I'll go by precinct. Precinct 1. I see Chris is online, so Chris is here. Precinct 2 is myself, Matt Tavares. Precinct 3.
Precinct 3, Dale Weber, where it all began.
Precinct 4.
Precinct 4, Claire Montanari.
Precinct 5, I believe is absent this evening. Precinct 6, also absent this evening. Precinct 7.
Precinct 7, George Brown, present.
Precinct 8.
Precinct 8, George McKay.
Precinct 9.
Precinct 9, Catherine Holmes.
Precinct 10.
Precinct 10, Alan Costello.
Precinct 11.
Precinct 11, Frank O'Brien.
Precinct 12. Pat was on mute, but she is here. She's online on Zoom. Precinct 13.
Precinct 13, Ron Riley.
Precinct 14 is absent. Precinct 15 is absent currently, but running late, and has messaged me that they will be here shortly. Precinct 16.
Pompey Delafield, Precinct 16.
Precinct 17.
Precinct 17, Joe Hutchinson.
And Precinct 18. Precinct 18, also absent. We do have a quorum between the online and chairs in the room as well. Before we get rolling through the agenda, I'd like to ask for a motion to amend this agenda so that I can introduce our new admin who started this week. So if I could get a motion on that.
A motion.
Okay, lots of motions and seconds, so I'm just going to go with who I saw first. So Claire Montanari motioned to amend the agenda, and Mr. Brown motioned to second that. Because we are hybrid and we are amending the agenda, I do need to do a roll call vote, and I'll try and do this fairly quickly. Chris Pratt.
Yes.
Precinct 2, Matt Tavares, yes. Precinct 3.
Yes.
Precinct 4.
Yes.
Precinct 5 is absent. Precinct 6 is absent. Precinct 7.
Yes.
Precinct 8.
Yes.
Precinct 9.
Yes.
Precinct 10.
Precinct 10, yes.
Precinct 11.
Precinct 11, yes.
Precinct 12.
Yes.
Precinct 13.
Yes.
Precinct 14 is absent. Precinct 15 is absent. Precinct 16.
Yes.
Precinct 17.
Yes.
And Precinct 18 is absent. All right, well, thank you very much. So, as you know, we did have some turnover in our admin assistant for the Community Preservation Act Committee, as well as the Committee of Precinct Chairs. But we, with the help of Lynn Barrett from the Finance Department, who the admin is responsible to, as well as the Town of Plymouth's HR Director, we have been able to find Kristen Ford, who is seated over there. Kristen, come on up here so they can get you on camera, because the rest of Plymouth would like to see that's sitting at home, I'm sure. So, no, you can stand right at the podium there, yeah. Welcome. Kristen comes from a long background in Norwell with the working, I would say the majority of your time specifically with Community Preservation Act responsibilities and working with that committee there in Norwell. but also worked within the planning department, the Community Housing Trust, trying to think, Complete Streets Committee, which I'm not sure exactly what that entails, and then the Pathways Committee as well. So she's well-versed in the ins and outs of local town government in Norwell, and I'm sure she just started Monday, so we're going to give her a little bit of a runway here to. She got introduced with a lot of names this week, I'm sure, and none of us are wearing name tags, so that makes it a little difficult, but welcome. I'd like to open it up to the Committee of Precinct chairs if they'd like to speak or ask any questions of Kristen, but I'm very excited to have her fill the role of helping myself and the vice chair and the clerk out with minutes and with getting information out to all of you. As you have seen, particularly in this last week, I have to send updated agendas because I forget things, and so I'm hoping that you can jump into my brain and help me to get through all this stuff. Mr. Hutchinson.
I'd just like to say welcome, and I appreciate the extent of your resume there. That's wonderfully applicable to what we all have to work with, and I'm sure you're going to be a great help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Weber.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
If there's one thing that you will at least remember verbatim from the Committee of Precinct chairs is that Precinct 3 is where it all began. So that's Mr. Weber. And I would just like to remind the chairs that any requests that you feel should go, that, you know, any requests regarding reaching out to town officials or department heads, you know, as town meeting members, you're always welcome to do that, but if you have any specific requests that need more of an admin feel to it, I just ask that you make those through the vice chair or through the chair, just so we can make sure that Kristen isn't running this way and then running that way, and then, you know, we do have to bear in mind that this is part-time with us and then part-time with the Community Preservation Act Committee as well. So thank you, Kristen, and I'm going to let you go back to your seat unless there's any comments online, not that I'm seeing any, and you're going to get to record. What's that? Oh, Pat's got her hand up physically. Okay, go ahead, Pat.
I just want to welcome Kristen and thank her for taking on this challenge. Thank you.
And Pat really thanks you because she is the clerk as voted in by the committee, so I think she's very excited to just review meeting minutes and not have to go verbatim through them. So,
Great. Thank you so much.
right. Anyone else? No? All right. So I'll let you sit down and we'll go through the first order of business, which is the approval of the minutes for October 17th, 2024.
I move that we approve the minutes.
I have a motion to approve by Pompey Delafield, a second from Mr. Brown. Any discussion? Not seeing any, we will run through the roll
Matt,
for the vote.
I'm sorry, I can't find my hand raised.
That's
on the
okay. Go
computer.
ahead, Pat.
Yes. There's a correction on the second page, second paragraph. It said, Mr. Brindisi resonated. That should be responded. So I will
Responded?
correct
Okay.
that.
I'll make that note here. Kristen, I'm not sure if you have those minutes yet, but I'll make sure I get with you to make that change. So I would need to have Pompey withdraw that motion, and then if you want to present a motion to approve these with the amended change.
I make that motion to approve with amended change.
All right, do I have a second? All right. Motion by Mr. Delafield, Kristen, and seconded by Mr. Brown. Discussion? Not seeing any, we will go through the roll. Precinct 1.
Approve.
Precinct 2, yes. Precinct 3.
Approved, and thank you, Pat, for your service on the pro-temporary basis.
Thank
Prec-
you.
Precinct 4.
Approve.
Precinct 5 is absent. Precinct 6 is absent. Precinct 7.
Precinct 7 approved.
Precinct 8.
Abstain.
Precinct 8 abstains. Precinct 9.
Approve.
Precinct 10.
Precinct 10, approve.
Precinct 11.
Precinct 11, approved.
Precinct 12.
Approved.
Precinct 13.
Approve.
Precinct 14 is absent. Precinct 15.
Apologies for being late, but approve.
Precinct 16.
Approve.
Precinct 17.
Approved.
And Precinct 18 is absent. All right. Well, thank you so much. We're going to move on to the town budgeting process presentation. We're all going back to school here on Municipal Budget 101. I'd like to welcome Lynn Barrett, the Director of Finance, as well as Town Manager Derek Brindisi. So, Lynn, welcome.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm going to start out just going over, we just have a few slides, just sort of to go over the process, beginning to end, sort of the budget process and how it works, and sort of what the thought process is in heading into the budget process. So I'll start out, and then Derek will take up the tail end of it. So this is just sort of the budget process timeline to the tax bill. So as you know, we set our tax rate in December, so you will soon be receiving your actual fiscal '25 tax bill. But what this chart sort of shows you is going all the way back to when we go to, and what I'm demonstrating here is the budget process that we're starting right now, which we're starting in 2024, and we'll finish in December of 2025 for the fiscal '26 tax rate. So we start in September, October, and we start really sort of looking at our revenue estimates and various things that are happening sort of within town, like selectmen might be voted their goals and other things. So we sort of put together all of those revenue estimates and guidelines, and we have a meeting in September timeframe, October timeframe, with the town manager, myself, our budget analyst, the chairman of the select board, chairman of the school committee, chairman of advisory and finance, and there may be some others there, but school superintendent, the business manager, we sort of all sit together and sort of go over sort of like a budget message and what are the available revenues that we have to work with on this budget for this year. So this year, what we did, and I'll go over it in a little bit more detail as we go through, but we looked at what are going to be sort of the new revenues coming in for the fiscal year, and we're sharing those revenues amongst the town and the school budget based on a percentage that has been determined primarily over the last number of years that we've done the budget process. The school takes up about 61% of the budget, and the town takes up 39%. So that sort of guideline was given to both the town side and the school side at that time. In November, we have all the departments submit their budgets. The school's doing their own sort of budget process at the same time. The town manager, myself, the assistant town manager, and budget analysts, we sit and we meet with every single department, every division head, every department head, and we go over their budgets, line item by line item, and we review the detail, we review increases, decreases, why they're asking for certain things, trying to get as many explanations as possible, and if it addresses something, they notify us, that that's something that they're addressing. We also look at their capital when we meet with them, because we will soon be reviewing capital with the Capital Improvements Committee in December. December timeframe is when the town manager then takes that budget that was submitted by the departments, and he makes a recommendation to the select board. So he will be doing that the night of December 17th with the select board, and that the select board will have that budget for a few weeks to review it, have any questions answered, that kind of thing. So then they will vote the budget the first week of January, or their first meeting in January. And then on January 14th, we'll have our joint meeting with the school committee and advisory and finance. And that's when the select board's budget is given over to advisory and finance. And at that point, during the months of January through February, advisory and finance they'll have their subcommittees, and they'll meet with every single department and review in detail their budgets. Those meetings are publicized. They're public meetings. You can attend those meetings if you want to. They're on, the meeting agendas on the website. So they sit with every single one of those departments and go over line item detail of their budgets. And then each of the subcommittees prepares a report that ends up in your budget books that go to town meeting and to so they make a recommendation, and then they have a public hearing for that budget. And it's a public hearing that's advertised in the paper. It's an open meeting, it's remote, and that meeting is scheduled for February 19th. At that point, the books are prepared in March, the A&F Book of Recommendations on the budget and all the other articles. So at the same time, they're reviewing all articles, just like you guys are. And then we go to town meeting. So town meeting is scheduled for April 5th, 2025. Town meeting will vote on the budget. And then at the end of the fiscal year, obviously we close the books, we go through a process where we repair our balance sheet, we submit that to the state, they certify our free cash, we look at what our actual results are in revenue and expenditures, and that helps us prepare those estimates for the following year. But at the same time, now the assessor's office starts working on new growth, on values, because they have to prepare everything and submit to the state to get certification every year. They have to get approved on their sales, they have to get approved on new growth, and we're actually in the process right now of doing that. We're about 20% in on approvals. They got their sales approved, and now they're working on new growth and values. October, fall town meeting, we make any adjustments to the budget that are necessary prior to us setting our tax rate. So this past year, we got in additional state aid that we put in the budget for contractual agreements with the town schools, so that was done in the fall. And then in November, this month, we're finalizing all that information with DOR. And in December, we will have our tax classification hearing, which is scheduled for December 10th, I think? Yeah, December 10th. And that's when the select board will vote to classify having either a single rate or a residential or commercial rate. Normally, we do single rate because we try to attract businesses to town and other things. So that's when tax rate recap gets submitted. So right now, we're working on it tonight to submit for fiscal '25. Oops, sorry. So this is sort of our sources of revenue for the budget. And this is an approximation every year. It's primarily is property taxes that funds the budget. It's about, around 75%, 76%. State aid is 13%. Local receipts is 8%. And then we have other available funds, indirects, all those things that add up to about 3%. So that's sort of the makeup of the revenue sources. These are our budget drivers on the expenditure side. So approximately 3/4 of the budget are salaries and benefits. And then we have our expense budgets and debt service. As I mentioned earlier, we split up that pie that we just showed in this slide right here, the salaries, expense, debt service, and fringe benefits. We break that down and we put it into what's on the town side and what is the school side. So this was the budget this past fiscal year, so the schools represented 61% of the budget, town was 39%, and it's broken up. The salaries are broken up, the fringe benefits, the expenses, and the debt service. And then I'm going to hand it over to Derek at this point to sort of go over these last two slides.
Good evening, Derek Brindisi, Town Manager. Thank you, Lynn, for your presentation. So one of the questions that was asked of Lynn for this presentation this evening was, what do we consider when we make up the budget? And so you'll see very clearly on this slide, first and foremost, our focus is on what are our core municipal services? What are the things that we have to do? Public safety, public works, and what are the state and federal mandates? As you also know, this past year, we've been negotiating with our 7 unions. We have completed 6 out of the 7 collective bargaining agreements. And so that's also one of our obvious main considerations, especially based upon what Lynn said, that 75% of our budget is either salaries or fringe benefits. So again, a major budget driver. And then last, I think, is probably the last component of what we consider when the finance department sends out their budget directions to each one of the departments. One of the things that they state is that to the department heads, based upon your request, certainly we want to know what are your core municipal services, what are your mandates, but what we also want to know is how are you in your department trying to achieve the select board goals and priorities that they set off in that fiscal year. So that's probably the newest component of our budget drivers. But I think we've shown over the last 2+ years that being very clear and concise as to the direction that the executive branch is trying to move this community in is set forth in those goals each and every year. And then, as you know, at the end of that fiscal year, we do a year in review, and we try to measure ourselves on how successful we were over the previous 12 months. So those are the considerations when we think about the new revenues each and every year. And then this is a slide that I think we've stolen from the school department. And I know Dr. Campbell has presented this in the past, but it's a really good depiction of how large the town of Plymouth is compared to our counterparts across the Commonwealth. And I've often have used the example of the city of Worcester for obvious reasons, because I know the city of Worcester and the data, and what I've said in the past is that, the city, so we're 100 square miles, approximately a little north of 100 square miles here in Plymouth. Worcester's about 33 square miles, so it's a third of the size as far as geographic area to cover. But they have about 550 police officers. We have about 130. And we're covering 3 times the size. So our response times, we have to try to, cover 3 times the geographic area with a third of the size of the police force that Worcester has. They have about 500 firefighters. We have about 125 firefighters. 7 fire stations, they have 11 fire stations. Again, trying to cover 3 times the area with a third of the staffing. And the DPW, the same. We're the 4th largest road network in Massachusetts with a third of the DPW staff, and I know Mr. Weber knows as well. So although many folks would say we have a large budget, quite frankly, you look at the work that we're able to accomplish with what I would say a very small workforce compared to the geographic area in which we have to cover that, the taxpayer is getting a substantial return in investment in their dollar value. So it's a struggle every year to balance the budget, but as you know, it's our responsibility to deliver a balanced budget to not only the select board, but certainly to town meeting as well. And so if you look at what Ms. Barrett pointed out, the budget process goes through many checks, right? So it starts with, as she pointed out, meeting with myself and the finance team, and then it goes to the select board, and they have 4 weeks to consider the presentation. And then after they're done considering that presentation, they'll then recommend it to A&F, and then it goes to the A&F filter, and then ultimately it gets to the town meeting, and then goes through that filter. So, I always say that the executive branch primarily makes recommendations, but at the end of the day, whether it's an appropriation, a passing of a local bylaw, or special legislation, it all ends with town meeting. So we can't do anything without town meeting support. We can't do anything with a partnership, both with the legislative branch and the executive branch. And that's the last slide, so I think we'll turn it over to questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brindisi, and thank you, Mrs. Barrett. Do we have any questions here within the room or online? Mr. Delafield?
Yeah, I just have a simple one. I know that the Miles Standish is a fairly substantial piece of property. How much commitment does the town have towards maintaining that piece of property?
To my knowledge, we don't really have any maintenance commitment, but I can tell you that our fire department, working through the fire chief, works very closely with the Department of Conservation and Recreation, especially when it comes to wildfires. I know it's probably not a good topic to talk about right now, given all the wildfires across the state, but his department has worked very closely this year and previous years on trying to manage that property to ensure that we don't have wildfires. So in that respect, I think that's probably the most that we do at the state forest.
Mr. Costello, did you have your hand raised earlier? Or?
Well, I was actually, Mr. Delafield beat me to it, but you take into consideration the state forest, and the numbers come back into alignment. So as far as being so large that, it puts us in a whole different category is a little bit of a stretch, but I'll look up the exact area, but it's probably half the town, the state forest, or the best part of 35–40% of the town. But I don't know, I just think the more, going back to your first or second slide that Ms. Barrett did, I'm more interested in the first work that is done on the budget. The process is good to know, and I appreciate that, but where are you coming up with numbers? What do you think you're expecting from the taxpayer, from the state, different funds? I mean, do you know in September and October, what type of money you're going to have to work with, or what you're expecting? And does that dictate the next several steps as to where you're going?
Yes, it definitely does. So we look at historical trends on local receipts, because local receipts are like motor vehicle excise, interest income, building permits, like any of those types of fees. So we look at those every year and try to look at trends. Are they trending up? Are they trending down? I mean, building cycles have gone up and down, so we always have to be careful of that. So we look at those historical numbers and then come up with either increases and decreases in those local receipts. Then we look at property taxes, and as you know, because of Prop 2.5, we can only, we're limited, on what taxes can go up, the 2.5% and new growth. So we use a formula to come up with what that amount is going to be. Then on state aid, what we've done the last few years is we just level fund state aid. We don't anticipate an increase in state aid in the fall because we've gotten, you might anticipate an increase and then the increase doesn't come in. Then you have to go back and cut your budget. So what we've done is we've level funded state aid, and then when it comes in, when we know what that number is in following June, July, we can make an adjustment to the budget in the fall, and that's what we've done. So those are some of the things that we do when we look at the revenue.
So when you go into the third meeting with department heads, you say, what would you like, or what would you hope to have in your budget? But just keep in mind, this is what we have to
This is the
divvy
pot
up.
of money that we have to do, and we're doing that right now. So
Okay.
we have the requests, and they've, come in like this, and we have the money. So we're whittling it down, to make sure that, what the town manager is going to recommend to the select.
No, I appreciate it. That's actually the steps that I
Yep.
thought we were talking about, but this is fine. But
Yep.
thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'm going to go with Mr. Brewster and then Ms. Holmes.
Thank you, Lynn. Just a couple questions. First, thank you for that slide. I think that's incredible. That's really helpful. Firstly, you talk about the fall town meeting being an adjustment to the budget. how much of a wrench in the works does that put into your, because you have the budget up to that point, and you've said, okay, this is our budget. Do you forecast towards that fall meeting, and how much of a wrench has the fall town meetings put on your budgetary, outlook?
So it doesn't, when we go into the Springtown meeting, the budget is level funded, it's balanced. It's not like we're expecting, a huge increase, but this particular year, both the town and the school were in the presence, currently working on negotiating contracts.
Right.
And last year, the school had to make a cut in their budget, that we, went to town meeting with
Right.
and that kind of thing. But we said, if state aid comes in, higher, then we can, split that and use that for our contractual negotiations. So over the summer, both town and school were negotiating and coming to agreements, and we knew what that state aid number was at the end of June. So that's, sort of what we used in developing, the budget for 25. And those adjustments were made at that fall town meeting.
Yeah, it's just, I'm always hesitant when we talk about the Springtown meeting. I always ask, what's the total budget? And then we come to the fall town meeting, and I should ask at that fall town meeting, all right, where are we now?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you see a great increase, or?
It's hard to tell
Yeah.
because it really has to do with the economy. Like, I think in the month of December, the state meets with a whole bunch of different groups and they start talking about, revenues and what they see on the state level
yeah.
as far as what's coming in. And they pretty much give notice to everyone if, last year, the governor's number was much less than what we
Right.
ended up getting, in her original budget in January. So you sort of look at that and you're like, well, okay, maybe it's going to be that, but then, the House gets it and then the Senate gets it and then they have a conference committee and then they finally, whittle it down, to the number that everyone's going to get. And they have to live within certain guidelines too. There's
Right.
ed reform, there's all kinds of things, that
Yeah.
they have to do, so.
All right, thank you. Second question, we continually, in the past, have talked about the 2.5% override. Where do you see us? Because 2 years ago, we were in a meeting and we were this close to doing it. And then the next year, we were still this close to doing it. I just, where's your forecast? Where's your?
So I think what we've done in the select board and the town manager last year, I think we have, it's about $2.5 million in excess levy capacity that's still on the table.
Oh, still?
That we have
Okay.
not touched. We're waiting for new growth to come in right now, so if it comes in slightly higher, then that, will make, continue to, would go into excess levy capacity. But we also, part of the levy, we used for, investments in our stabilization fund, investments in our facility maintenance stabilization fund. We also used it for roads. And I think we're going to continue to do that. So, as part of the taxes, those are sort of, you could look at them as sort of like one-time things, even though we should always do roads every year,
Right.
But those are things that if we ever got into a pickle, we could, sort of, look at those monies for operating budget if we had to. But that's not the case here. I don't think we would do that.
If I could just,
Mr. Brindisi?
if I could just jump in a little bit. So getting to the question, are we forecasting an override? I think, going back to Ms. Barrett's points, we have flexibility, so we can avoid an override, but we've been very clear. The 61-39% split, it forces both sides of the house to live within our means. And We're still going through our side of the house, but if that means cuts, then we're going to have to make some decisions. You know, I don't think that it's appropriate to continue to have to go back year after year, excess levy capacity to balance the budget, right? Because then we're going to get in this position where, you know, it's at zero at some point. But, you know, if we understand where our new revenues are coming year after year, and we're committed to the 61-39% split, it's no different than balancing your budget at home. You only have so much money to pay the mortgage and buy the food and pay the utilities. And so that's our commitment. You know, we hope that we can keep the excess levy capacity at between that 2.5 million for that rainy day, if that were to come, or if there's a down economy or a recession, we have that buffer to get us through some difficult years, like the general stabilization account as well. So I think we all have to recognize that those two numbers, 61-39, is how we should live over the next, I would say, 3 to 5 years.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Holmes?
Hi there. I just wanted to make a quick comment. Mr. Brindisi was citing the comparison between Worcester and Plymouth, and I'd love to see a comparison that was similar to the town of Plymouth, but Worcester is not a good reference point. And so especially when we're talking about the number of resources and how we're comparing the number of police officers or the number of firefighters that we have compared to Worcester, you know, Worcester is it's a city, not a town, but it's a city of 210,000 people. And Plymouth is about, you know, depending on the census, you know, anywhere from 50 to 65,000. And, you know, so it's really not a like for like comparison. And then secondly, Worcester has a significantly different crime rate than we do. They have, you know, violent crime is probably 5 or 6 times as high as Plymouth, looking at some of the numbers that I've seen. Plymouth has a fairly low crime rate. In spite of the horrific incident that we had down in our downtown area last month. Having said that, though, they also have much larger buildings, which require different types of training for our fire departments. So I just want to make sure that when he's referencing how low our staffing is for our police and fire department, and no one's saying that, you know, we're up to our goal rates for our fire and police officers today, but we're certainly and not in a position where we could compare it to a city of Worcester. Because I certainly wouldn't want to think that we're looking to be hiring for that, knowing that we are in a position where we're trying to balance our budgets.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Just the way I took Mr. Brindisi's comments, I think one, just coming from his background working for the city of Worcester, but I think also he was trying to make not so much a point about being, while the police and fire are definitely in need of some staffing, I think he was trying to make more of the point of how far we have to stretch to get from one town to the other from some of these headquarters and fire stations. I think that's might have been more where he was going with that. But I agree, it's a different, there is no animal like Plymouth, so it is a little hard to make some comparisons to other towns, unfortunately. And I also do agree with Mr. Costello's point that every time I see that map, I have always kind of raised an eyebrow when it does the overlay to Boston. While it's impressive and it makes a point, I always look at that bottom left corner and on the western side of that and say, well, a lot of that is forest, unless we're counting the bears or anything that might be in there. Well, I hope there's not bears, but you know what I mean. But that being said, are there any other questions for the finance director or the town manager? No? If not, I thank you. And actually, I do have a request, though. Could you send that presentation to me, and then I'm going to have Kristen actually... I know a lot of people here have heard and understand this process fairly well, but I'd like it to get it out. I'd like Kristen to send it out to all of the town meeting members, just because we have a lot of new faces. All right, thank you so much. Thanks for coming in tonight. Okay, moving right along. We're going to go into the master plan committee update, fresh off of a hearing session last night in town. The chair of that, the master plan committee, is Steve Bolleton. And then I want to address some comments and bring in our appointee, Joe Hutchinson, as well. So welcome, Mr. Bolleton. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair. Good evening, committee members. So the Master Plan Committee, in conjunction with our consultants, Stantec, and their affiliates, have heard from the residents so far through 3 forums, 2 listening sessions, several workshops, and 2 surveys. All of this is available on the Master Plan website, on the town website. So I encourage the committee members and their fellow town meeting members and their constituents to all come to that website, learn about what it is we're hearing about, what they're seeing, get that information, and come and participate. Again, we have surveys that can be done. At each of the workshops, the participants work together collectively at tables to come up with ideas, guidance. Again, the purpose of that is to supplement the statistics. We have a lot of dry information, tons and tons of it. We can parse the town to many different levels when it comes to the numbers. But the master plan is more than that. The master plan is also the sentiment of the community, and that's what we're trying to get from all of these various inputs, community participation. So what I'd like to do tonight is briefly address the information that we're providing to the residents and what they're saying back to us regarding some of the major areas that we're talking about. And I've sent you the overall, what we call Plymouth at a glance, and that's available to everybody. Again, it's on the website, and it's handed out to people in various forms at each of these workshops. So they have this information that they can work with. So let me start first with who we are. And as you know, Plymouth is, I don't have the presentation up, Mr. Hutchinson. I'm just going to go through it so we can save some time. Plymouth is the fastest growing community in Massachusetts. We are consistent with other communities in Massachusetts in that we are aging. 40% of our residents are over the age of 65. Soon, more than 50% of them will be 55 and older. Differently than other communities, however, there are more single-person households in Plymouth than there are households with children. That is somewhat unusual. In presenting this information to the community, we get 2 different sides as a response. One group has the sentiment that says we should continue to encourage that type of growth because seniors utilize fewer services than families. There's a terrible scare. Apparently, children are radioactive when it comes to town government. So people worry, oh my God, if we have more families, we have more children, and then we just saw school is 61% of our budget. That's one side of the coin. Others, however, have said, you know, Plymouth really needs to look at ways to create a greater balance as to those who are coming here, with the understanding that children bring to the community just as much as they cost the community in a lot of ways. A simple example, of course, is if you have a school that isn't full, a classroom with 25 students, that's set for 25 students, will have the physical space and the support for 25 students. If there are only 15 students in that classroom, that costs us money because we do get money from the state per student. So a full classroom, a classroom at or close to capacity is far better than an empty classroom. So there's a question as we talk about who's living in Plymouth and what do we do to encourage different people to come and stay and be a part of our community. The next area I want to talk about is where we live and what we do. Plymouth remains a primarily single-family home ownership community. And I say primarily, I mean by vast stretch, that's what we are. 78% of our housing is single-family detached. So when people start talking about, oh my God, all of these condos and apartments, you know, 78% of our housing is single-family detached. 81% of our housing is owner-occupied. I will let you know that that is well above the state average, which is 62%. So the people who are in the homes here in Massachusetts, in Plymouth, are the owners of those homes. That creates a great deal of challenge for our community. Because at the same time, while the average income of our residents is rising, so is the expense of living in Plymouth. As a result, almost a third of homeowners and more than half of the renters are what is called cost burdened, meaning that they spend more than 30% of their collective household income on housing expense alone. That's an extraordinary statistic. It shows, again, how challenging it is to live in Plymouth. One factor for that, of course, is the wages in Plymouth. The wages for the jobs that are here in Plymouth are not keeping up with the increase in our cost of housing. This has led to something of a clash again, of visions for Plymouth, from what we've heard. We have residents who live in less developed parts of town who want to prevent any further housing growth. Conversely, we have residents who have living in the more dense areas of town existing who've said, we're willing to talk about greater density and changes in our density, as long as that includes addressing affordability issues. One sentiment that's consistent with, however, regardless, is that Plymouth should be creating housing that is more consistent with area incomes, rather than chasing affordability of 10% as the state requires, which is something that we're going to have a real challenge doing. We are currently over 800 units of affordable housing short of reaching 10%. Put simply, it's 3 of the Oasis buildings. That's what we're short, 3 of them. The likelihood of us getting to 10% in affordable housing is going to be a real challenge. Do we chase that, or do we work on something different? Do we focus on quote-unquote affordable housing, or housing that's affordable? Another important aspect that we've been talking about, and that'll be raised again at our next forum, is our environment. Despite being more than 400 years old and constituting 103 square miles, according to Lee Hartman and the GIS data that I keep getting, Plymouth has excelled in protecting open space. Over 37% of Plymouth is open space. Almost all of that is permanently protected. And yes, that does include the state forest, which is, by the way, 23,000 acres or 20 square miles. It's about 20% of our total town. But certainly, 20,000 acres or 20 square miles.
This chart says 10,000.
The state forest?
Yeah, I get 12.8, and it's 26 square miles. So I was incorrect. That's why I ran off the computer on the.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I don't want to interrupt you, Stan. No, sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, I didn't log in, but.
So,
This is your hand, though.
well, I can talk to, again, where the consultants go, so I'll look that. I was looking at the state's website when I came up with the number. So, regardless as to how much we have preserved, that doesn't mean we need to stop. We're a sole source aquifer community. That is the complete and central driving force when it comes to preservation in this town. We need to protect our water supply. So residents remain concerned about that, and justifiably so. So again, now we have to start talking about that balance. Where do we preserve versus where do we grow? Another concern that we had, however, is also access to open space. Access to open space remains uneven in Plymouth. Only 38% of our residents are able to walk to publicly accessible open spaces. We have a lot of open space in the south of Plymouth, not so much in the north and west. and that's a challenge. One of the things that have been talked about is, obviously, there's some areas that we're not going to be able to create more open space, but we should be working harder to create connectivity amongst and between our open spaces. The trails networks, things like that, new pathways, the ability to create walkable areas for everyone. Those are important areas that have been raised. Finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about transportation, and transportation actually flips in with both our housing and our economic development issues. Plymouth remains auto-dependent, no question about that, particularly due to the dispersion of jobs. Here's some interesting stats. About 7,400 people live and work in Plymouth, a large number of whom are work from home. In fact, if work from home were a category of occupation here, it would be the second largest occupation in Plymouth. 16,000 people commute into Plymouth on a daily basis. 23,000 people commute out of Plymouth on a daily basis. Put simply, to live in Plymouth, you need to work elsewhere. To work in Plymouth, you need to live elsewhere. That has led to an increase in traffic, where you have people leaving to go to their job outside of Plymouth and driving in to come to their job into Plymouth. We're going to have traffic. And where we now have so many more people working from home, we don't have traffic necessarily as just in the rush hour areas. We've discovered, for example, lunchtime is now a heavy traffic area. People who are working from home and say, okay, I'm taking my mid-afternoon break, I'm going to go get something to eat, I'm going to run my errands. When do they do that? Midday. So we're now seeing traffic stem at different times than we traditionally have seen it. That's a big change, something we need to factor in. With respect to our economy, Plymouth is still seen as a tourist community. However, post-COVID tourist revenue is down. It is actually recovering more slowly than the rest of the state, suggesting that competition for tourist dollars will continue to result in little growth in the tourist area in Plymouth. We can do more, but it is going to remain a challenge. At the same time, Plymouth does not have a sufficient number of jobs of the types that allow for people to both live and work in our community. So the residents are encouraged by the growth of jobs in certain areas, most notably healthcare. Healthcare has been a huge growth area for Plymouth, and it's a good example of something that we should encourage because it provides both living wage jobs and necessary services for our community. But we are concerned about the lack of growth in other areas. Otherwise, we see retail and hospitality as being our other large job areas, neither of which pay a living wage. So there is a call for increased entrepreneurship, small business, differing types of jobs with living wage growth here in our community. Ultimately, the goal seems to be the same for everyone, which is we want to create a community where people are able to live, work, and stay for generations. We want to keep our character. At the same time, we recognize there are challenges in that we are changing. So ultimately, the goal, as we get through the master plan process, is to create a balance amongst all of those competing interests. To do that, we need to hear more from the residents. We continue to hear from them, but we need to hear more. We have 3 forums set for December. On December 4th, we have a forum at South Middle School, 6 p.m. That's going to focus on our sustainability and open space and recreation. On December 9th, we have a listening session here in Town Hall, and for that, we're also going to have a remote option. And then again, on December 16th, another listening session, 6 p.m. at West Elementary. Now, we're going out to the community. We're asking the community to let us know if they want more. The committee members are going to be anxious to go ahead and participate in as many sessions as we can, talk to as many people as we can, and create as much participation as we can. So with that, if there are any questions, happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll defer to my fellow committee member, Mr. Hutchinson.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Bolton, for coming in and giving us that update. It's much appreciated as to where we are. Some of it we definitely know and have heard from you before. I would echo Mr. Bolton's sentiment for the town meeting members, and other elected officials even that live here as residents in the town to go out to these meetings and let your voices be heard. There's no greater vehicle to see something that you want in your community than being active in your local government. So this is a prime opportunity where you don't have to be elected, but you can go be heard. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hutchinson very quickly. So just so the committee knows, going forward, we won't have Mr. Bolton here every month giving us updates, but I am, just like the town meeting handbook update, legislative oversight committee update, Mr. Hutchinson is our appointee from this committee to sit on the master plan committee, so he'll be giving, I'll give him 5 minutes to speak about anything upcoming or anything of concern that he thinks that the master plan committee would like to hear from residents. I'm going to turn it over to him, and then we'll do questions with both Mr. Bolton and Mr. Hutchinson. Does that work, Claire? I saw your hand up.
I just wanted those dates repeated again.
Oh, so it's December 4th at South Middle School?
At 6.
December 9th at Town Hall, and that should be a hybrid, hopefully. And December 16th at West Elementary School. And these will be on the Master Planning Committee's website, I'm sure, if they aren't already. They might actually already be.
They are.
Yeah.
Sure. And if anyone has any ideas as to how we can better publicize this, we're all ears. We want to get this out, so any thoughts, any suggestions? I would do skywriting if I thought it would work, but we'll accept any proposals.
Did you put it into the budget? They're reviewing that now. Okay. Mr. Hutchinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, what I wanted to say was that I think of Steve's presentation as a call to action for all of us. I think that the precincts are a significant path to engagement to our local constituents and to other citizens who might want to have their voices heard with respect to the future of the town. This part of the master plan process is critical for citizens, because this is our opportunity to talk about vision. So this is, what do you want to see Plymouth look like in 2034? So in the areas that Steve was talking about, and the next big cross-town meeting is going to be about sustainability and resiliency, natural resources, the aquifer, our coastline, the forests, all of that, and open space and recreation. Those are critical factors in the quality of life that we have here in Plymouth, and as Steve said, is to the character of the town. So I urge all of you to come out to these meetings and have your voices heard. There are 3 classes of meetings. I don't want to, that's probably not the best way to say it. But there are meetings that cover across town, and the consultants come and they bring expertise, and that's wonderful. But you bring the ideas, and that's critical. So it's kind of wonderful versus critical. And likewise, we're going to have local, so those are crosstown meetings. The only one left is December 5th, and that's at the South Middle School, so please put it on your calendars. I also, though, would point out that the second type of meetings are the local meetings in your neighborhoods. So if your folks can't get out down to the South Middle School, we're going to come to you, the consultant. Steve, do the consultants come to them?
Yes, and,
Yeah, okay,
and,
so
and
we'll
Mr. Hutchinson's correct. I use the word, it is December 5th, not December 4th, December 5th. It's Thursday, December 5th. So Mr.
So
Hutchinson
December
had the
5th,
date
Claire,
correct.
for the South Middle School.
Yes.
Oh, okay, So, but, where was I?
Consultants come to.
We come to you.
We come to you, we'll bring some expertise, and, that's going to happen in your local neighborhoods. But also significantly, if you have specific neighborhoods in your precincts, for example, I have Buttermilk Bay, I have the White Island Ponds Association, I have, Red Brick in particular, which has its own meeting on the 29th of January. But, we will be able to do what are called pop-up meetings. And we had one at the Council on Aging that was particularly successful because folks there tended to have lively opinions, and it was an exciting conversation. I think Steve would agree. Anyway, those would be, the format would be based on sets of questions and basically a template for enabling conversations in local neighborhoods about local issues based on the formats that are provided by the consultants and the committee. So I urge you to get back to me from the COPC, get back to Steve. Basically use all of the lines of communication that you can find to kind of get out the citizens, make their voices known. And so that's pretty much what I wanted to say. I could go on if you want.
Yeah,
Did
I'm
you
sure.
need that, Matt?
Well, thank you very much, and
Okay.
I'll allow you to go on at the next meeting, and you'll get your 5 minutes of fame each month.
Okay,
But
thank you.
are there any questions either in the room or online? Not seeing any. That's what this committee can expect going forward. If there's major developments that come out of the master plan, we'll see. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Brown.
I will make one comment from Mr. Bulletin. There are a lot of us real old people. We wait for all them people to go driving out of town or getting to where they are in town before we meander out on the streets, which is where you're getting a lot of your daytime traffic. I'll be honest, I see that when I'm out going shopping.
There's no question. We have absolutely, we're looking at that data, and the consultants were very surprised to see how busy our roads remain throughout the day. And you're absolutely right, because we've looked at that, and again, as we are an aging community, we do see a lot more daytime driving from seniors. Understandably, there are people who, at all ages, have challenges driving at night, and so daytime driving is far more important for them. And that's another issue as well. So yes, it's certainly one of the things we need to think about as we talk about, amongst other things, our transportation hubs.
I'll give you one other item. The neighborhood I live in, they're all gone. There's only a few of us left. They're seasonal. And that has a lot to do with our community as well.
We are, I think Mr. Hartman had, I think we don't quite reach the seasonal community definition that the state has. I thought he said it was something like 9% is seasonal.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bulletin. Any other further comments, questions? Not seeing any. Thank you for coming in this evening. I know you
Thank
had
you.
a meeting last night as well as Mr. Hutchinson, so we'll get you home. Thank you, Mr. Bulletin. Okay, now on to everybody's favorite topic, the postmortem, if you will, for the 2020 Fall Town Meeting. We do this each meeting following the annual meeting in the fall and in the spring. I'm just going to open it right up to any comments from the chairs or anyone in the room and online. So if I'll give you my personal feelings. There was a lot of debate, a lot of discussion, and there was some confusion. I'm still looking forward to seeing the final draft of the charter that's going to be going before the State House, because even looking back at my notes and votes and everything from the day, I'm still probably a little confused. And then once we see something like that, of course, I'm sure we'll be able to disseminate that to town meeting and the chairs. but know that it still has to go through the process of going through the State House. So any comments, questions regarding town meeting? Of course, here we go. I actually saw Ms. Adelman, and then Mr. Brewster, and then Mrs. Montanari, and then Mr. Costello. I'll try and keep it in order. Go ahead, Mrs. Adelman.
All right, thank you. My precinct met after the town meeting, and one town meeting member thought it was confusing because of the way the moderator conducted the meeting. But the majority of my town meeting members thought the articles in themselves were confusing, the amendments were confusing, and we're still confused of what we voted on. So that's my feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I had Mr. Brewster next.
Yeah, I was concerned as Mr. Weber was before town meeting. There was a lot of stuff at the 0 hour. I know that there's a bunch of bylaws and things that say that they can come in that time. I was deeply concerned when FinCom had a meeting just before town meeting that had a major impact on a bunch of articles on town meeting. I also asked town council, she was busy speaking to other people about different issues of the legality of the vice chair of the selectmen taking over for the vice chair of FinCom. I would echo what the previous person said, that the confusion was very, it was a very confusing, and I think that we as town meeting need to reiterate with the moderator that we're in charge of town meeting and that we need to say, okay, let's take a beat. What are we talking about? And we have the option to say, we just got this information and we're not going to vote on it. I think that that's something that town meeting needs to consider on multiple articles where it was so confusing and we just got the information. Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Montanari.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? Deadlines. I don't think we ought to be able to absorb any material coming in for our consideration after a certain time. And it was mentioned at our last COPC meeting that that is the duty of town meeting. We can accept at the last minute. I don't know if we could change that, but it's confusing to get information just within minutes of when we have to consider and vote on it. And if we could change that, I would love it. In other words, establish a deadline 4 days before or a week before, and that's the extreme cutoff. Nothing else can be submitted. And if we could stick to it, policy would be established, and I think we'd all have a better view of what's going on.
That's definitely a repeated concern that I think we've had. I wouldn't just say this town meeting or the prior town meeting, I'd say for years. I think that that would require a bylaw change, which you could bring before town meeting. So, and that could be voted on to establish that deadline. I will caution a little bit where, you know, if you look at Plymouth's form of government, it does, you know, mimic the larger federal government. You can make amendments from the floor and those things will happen. I mean, they don't happen often because the moderator has looked a little differently on that because he wants it in writing and he wants it before town council rather than from the floor. That is a significant disagreement between myself and the moderator, because that is the will of the people, and we are the voice of the people. And if we have something that comes up at the last minute because you've heard of something, you should be allowed to amend it, or you should be allowed to change it. But I agree with you, and that's definitely a large concern I think we hear in all our precincts constantly. Mr. Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Speaking specifically about the charter articles, in all fairness, being the chairman of the Charter Review Committee and having presented them, I understand the confusion in the room. There was some last-minute wrangling and some confusion, but I thought the takeaway of the day was pretty positive. The Charter Review Committee was able to pass 7 out of the 11 articles. It's a pretty good record. And in those changes were some pretty substantive improvements to the charter, and I think you'll see that reflected. I think I'd blame myself. I didn't do a good enough job stressing Article 19, which was sort of the foundation of what we were hoping to do. The charter, as it reads today, through no one's fault, but over several charter committees, it's sort of a hodgepodge of information. It's, by most accounts, difficult to read and use. And I thought the committee had a pretty good idea of reordering that in such a way that it would be easy to use in the future and, in turn, be easy to make comparisons as we went along with the other articles. Now, it didn't pass, and that's fine, but I think that would have been a huge improvement. And I stated that day that if we did not pass the other 10, that would have been the nicest one to pass, something to build on in the future. But it didn't happen. But we were able to achieve a lot of changes. There was some confusion, and I'll admit that. The legal wrangling behind me a few times on a few of the articles, the last-minute meetings, I didn't even know about some of that as the chair of the Charter Committee. But I thought that was the process that we all signed up for. We did make some changes on the floor. There were some last-minute changes. Some people out on the floor that Saturday morning had equally good ideas, and those won the day. Those got voted in. So I'll just give you an update. Our admin, Michelle Turner, for the last 2 weeks has been plugging in all the changes and putting together the new charter. And very soon you'll see a draft. And I think, unfortunately, what you're going to see is you'll see some decent changes, some nice positive changes, but the flow of the document will still be a little convoluted, which is unfortunate. But overall, it's never an easy process. I think we're at the podium there 3+ hours, 2 or 3 hours to cover all the articles. There were some good suggestions, there was some confusion, but at the end of the day, I think we made out pretty well, the town and town meeting. And, I'm pretty proud of how it worked out in the end. Certainly would have liked a little less confusion, but, hey, I'll take the heat for that. But overall, I think once you read about it, the appointments process for the FinCom has been changed. To some degree, it may very well be changed where now it's a public forum, and I think that's a huge improvement. I think talking with the school department, there was a change to make, there was one line in the charter, a future bylaw, which I think will lend itself to future town meeting members and town administrators to work together if they want to change the way Plymouth does business. So I take away is that it was actually, I took away as a good day, so I hope everyone else did in the end as well. As far as the rest of the town meeting, I thought it went pretty well. The morning, there was no problems. Everything seemed to run pretty good. So that was my take on the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Costello. Anyone else in the room or online with any recap? Yeah, Mr. McKay.
Yeah, I'd just like to know what the process is going forward from here. You said you're going to have a draft available, And when we see the draft, what is the process to get it from a draft to something more permanent?
I'll talk to Michelle tomorrow and see how far along she is, but she's getting the document ready to send up the line to the state. It goes in front of state attorney or the legislature for approval, and that's what we will get back. But I think you'll have an opportunity to see a draft prior to it going up. I'll make sure I get an answer to you, and I'll get the information to the chairman so we can distribute it. Thank you.
As a follow-up question, do we have any idea how long the state is going to take to review the process?
A minimum a year at least.
I was going to say, I wouldn't venture a guess on that, but as soon as I see it, I'll make sure the chairman gets it. Thank you.
Ms. Holmes?
I just had a couple quick comments. I was not in the room for some of the event. I was online, and there was certainly a well-respected member of our town meeting that was deeply offended by the tables and some type of protest, it sounded like. So I wasn't there. I don't know what that is, but if we are communicating feedback to the moderator, I think we need to figure out what that was about and make sure that we're not, whatever it was, we're not offending our town meeting members. And so maybe no tables inside the facility. I'm not really sure what took place, but he was very upset. And I think that it's certainly worth investigating to try to figure out why that occurred. And then the other thing that I was going to say was that the comment of people saying that we need to have a cutoff. We do have cutoffs, and, but there are certainly things that we can continue to talk about on the floor, and we can take motions even on the floor, as Matt mentioned. I would just also want to raise that the way that it flows right now, and we get our books so late, we have so little time, and many of our precincts are now having multiple caucuses. And a lot of those motions and comments and feedback that we ended up seeing as quote changes came about because of our town meeting process, which we allow residents and our town meeting members to get together and discuss these articles. So, I don't know how we would be able to do that because people are still talking through and debating, and they're debating right on the floor. And that's the whole beauty of our town meeting process. So if we're saying that we can't accept any more changes, well, changes are going to come when people are debating. That's the whole purpose. We get together and we discuss these articles, and changes are naturally going to flow. So those were my two comments. But I appreciate everybody that did come out for town meeting. Oh, I did have one more. One of the things that I always used to do, and Matt and I have talked about this, is make sure that we have all of our precinct members accounted for. And there was an awful lot of vacancies that were in our precincts. And so as chairs, I will charge and ask all of us again, and I'm as guilty of it as any because I have a vacancy. We had someone that passed away in our precinct, to make sure that you have a full precinct. And if you don't, work with the clerk or work with town meeting members or let us know, because, we need to make sure that we've got 9 members in every precinct that are at least on the docket for town meeting. Now, unfortunately, leading up to town meeting, many of you know I was extremely sick and I couldn't fill my vacancy, and we actually have a caucus scheduled in 2 weeks' time, and so we're going to get ours filled in prior to spring town meeting, but it's something that's really important. We need to make sure that we have full precincts. Thanks.
Mr. Brewster?
Just a comment, we were talking about amendments, and my major problem was that FinCom had a meeting where they made an agreement with the school committee on a major article, and they totally changed that article 5 minutes before town meeting started. That was one of the things that I had a major problem with. I have no problem with amendments, and I think that we deal with amendments pretty well. I'm just talking about when we change an entire article 5 minutes before town meeting, I think we as town meeting members have the responsibility to say, I haven't been able to vet this. That was my only comment. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone, Mr. Weber?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question that I could ask Alan Costello offline, but since he said it on the mic, I'll ask it on the mic. And that is, you were saying, Mr. Costello, that your secretary from the Charter Review Committee is currently plugging in the changes, and that one of those changes that we'll probably be pleased to see is an amendment to the school jurisdictions. My recollection is that that article failed, so I'd like to know what you were referring to and clear up that confusion that
Well, let me
I had.
clarify as best I can. You're right, it didn't, as a charter review article, impact the charter, but discussion about the proposed article prompted some talk between both the select board and the school committee, and they have set up a meeting group amongst themselves where they're going to come forward with a bylaw in regards to the school responsibility for the facilities. So I apologize if I lumped that in, but it's a direct result of the Charter Review Committee's work and, and everyone's discussion about it and the ability to work and make some compromises. But that's my understanding, that they're going to put together a bylaw for the Springtown meeting that will encompass what we had hoped to do with a charter article. And I'll get back to you on that. If I'm wrong, that's how it's been explained to me.
Oh, thank you, because that clarifies it. I thought you were referring to something that I might have missed, but I didn't think I did, so thank you.
Nope, you're correct.
No
That was
charter.
Article 21, and that did not pass, so you're
Article
right.
21 was a
Yep.
fail, right. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. I want to avoid confusion like we have had, so get the questions out now. Are there any other questions within the room, online? Not seeing any. I'll bring some of these comments back to the moderator to answer Ms. Holmes' question regarding the town meeting member. It was a town meeting member from my precinct that was upset. It was in regards to a table with literature on Gaza ceasefire within the school building. I've heard the moderator speak about it on WATD, and I believe I read an article. I don't know which news source at this point, but I have my feelings on that. But the moderator has allowed things in the school building before. I think after this one, he might think a little bit differently about it, but to disseminate information. So I will speak to him about that, Catherine, and let you know what comes out of that conversation. Mr. McKay.
I just wanted to make a comment because I'm not sure phrasing it the way you did in terms of the moderator allows people to set up in the school area is correct. Because as you probably know,
He actually was on the record on WATD and at town meeting on the floor stating that he made the decision to, they were the people that the group that was there were the people that had the ceasefire resolution that was deemed out of order, and he allowed them, per his quotes, to set up a table within the school.
well, when I request a table, he says you need to talk to the school. Now, that's my only comment.
I understand that, but that's not what he said on WATD, in printed media, and on town meeting floor. That being said, Mr. McKay, you're actually up. So Mr. McKay is here presenting on behalf of the Plymouth 400 Legacy Organization, and this is appropriately timed with everything that is about to kick off, I guess tomorrow, Friday, right through the weekend, and leading into the holiday of Thanksgiving here in America's hometown. So, Mr.
Well, I
McKay,
want to
welcome. The
thank you,
floor is yours.
and I didn't realize, I knew the timing of what was coming up this weekend with the Thanksgiving parade and other things, but I didn't realize I was dovetailing into one of Steve Bulletin's comments, which was the fact that Plymouth has traditionally relied on tourism as a method to promote the town and make some money. And as you know, the Plymouth 400 Committee was established to commemorate and talk about the landing of the Pilgrims in 1620, and we worked for about 10 years planning super events that were going to occur in 2020. And for many of those events, we had every hotel room booked from Maine to Rhode Island. And unfortunately, we got hit with COVID, and the whole tourism industry nationally and everywhere went up in smoke. And that's unfortunate. But one of his comments was, we're behind in recovering our tourism industry compared to other people in the United States. One of the things I'm involved with now, and which is really why I wanted to talk here, is I'm involved in the Plymouth 400 Legacy programs. And specifically, part of that program is designed to resurrect and reinforce some of the tourism industry that has occurred in the past, and we want to have it go into the future. Well, having said that as an introduction, let me get into some of the meat of what I wanted to talk about tonight. One of the things we do at this time of year is we do a mailing program. And we work with the Postal Service to create a special cancellation to put on mailings that leave Plymouth. And this year we worked with two organizations. One is a local school, and we had students design potential artwork, and you'll see that at the lower right-hand side of the screen. This artwork of a cornucopia was actually done by a third grade student. We took that artwork to the Postal Service, and they make a cancellation out of it. The one on the left at the bottom was done by the woman that owns Inky Hands. So normally every year we put out two special picture cancellations, and this year we happen to have two. The verbiage at the top talks about what our forecast is for this year. We always begin promoting this in August. We give out free greeting cards to people in an attempt to get them interested in the program, primarily because a lot of people don't understand what I'm talking about when I talk to them in my turkey suit. They just think I'm a wild turkey running around. So in any event, we give away about 6,000 greeting cards. About 4,000 come back to us for the purpose of getting reprocessed in the mail, promoting Plymouth, Massachusetts as the site of the first Thanksgiving. And we're on target to do that this year. In addition to that, we get about 17,000 people using these postmarks through various business organizations and including the town organizations. And to further increase the size of the program, we continue this through mid-December, and we ask people to include their Christmas mailings in this program. And it's worked out very well, and this year we should get about 21,000 pieces of mail that go through the program and have Plymouth, Massachusetts advertised on there as the site of the first Thanksgiving. Where we are today is we've got people from out of state and around the world want to participate in this program, and this year we've got about 25 states that are involved, and we have about 3 foreign countries. We expect to get that up a little bit higher before the end of the program. So one of the things, the other item we've done is we've extended the Plymouth license plate program. If you remember back in 2016, we said we're going to have a Plymouth license plate, and we promoted it, and eventually we did what was necessary to pre-sell 1,000 of these license plates. And when you pre-sell 1,000 of these specialty license plates, the Registry of Motor Vehicles gets them into production, and they go out to the community. In addition to that, as you know, we reserved the low-number license plates to auction off. And PL number 1 was auctioned off for $10,000. PL 1620 was auctioned off for $10,000. In total, that auction created $100,000 in revenue for Plymouth 400 to use and promote the town of Plymouth. We're continuing that program, and so right now, anybody can go to the Registry of Motor Vehicles that has a vehicle in Massachusetts and get a specialty license plate with the logo of the Mayflower and the Native and PL as the preceding designation. This is really the only revenue the PL Legacy, the Plymouth 400 Legacy program gets is from these license plates that are sold. We get something out of the initial fee, and every 2 years when the plate is renewed, we get some money from the registry to support some of the legacy programs we're doing. And it's very minimal, but through some minimum efforts that we've done, the revenue has been remaining flat, so it hasn't gone down. One of the things I wanted to talk about here is there have been misconceptions about getting a license plate. Some people tell me, gee, that's no longer available. But it is available. All you have to do is go to the Registry of Motor Vehicles and request one and turn in your old plates, and they'll give you a new one. The other one I heard the other day was you have to be a Mayflower descendant to get these license plates. And I said, no, you don't. Anybody who has a vehicle that's registered in Massachusetts can get one of these license plates. So anybody you know, town meeting members, anybody on the board, encourage them to get these PL license plates. One of the other things I wanted to mention at this meeting was that when we pre-sold the 1,000 units, they rushed the license plates into production. And so of the first maybe 1,500 license plates that were produced, they were not produced with the quality they would normally produce them. And I want to show you an example of what happened to my license plate. This is a relatively low number license plate because it was one of the first several thousand that was produced. But after a few years of sitting in the sun and the heat and the dampness, what happens is the paint starts peeling away. But for those of you that deal with the Registry of Motor Vehicles, all you have to do is go online and tell them you have a damaged plate and you want it replaced. And for $10, you can get a brand new license plate. So now, instead of this damaged license plate on my vehicle, I have a brand new one, and this is hanging in my basement. So anybody can get one. If your license plate is damaged like this, you can get it replaced for $10, and you can have something for your man cave or your she shed. So what we've been doing here, though, is we've been trying to rebrand the license plate program to make it look like it's more current. And so a lot of the publicity and brochures and even the magnetic sticker I have on my car shows 2023 rather than 2020. So we're trying to get people away from thinking, oh, this was a one-time thing for 2020, so I can't do it anymore. And so when this signage needs to be replaced, we'll put even a more modern date on it. The other thing we've done is where we have these plaques in local businesses and hotels, where people can pick up information on how to get the license plate. We've redesigned the format here to show not 2020, but 2023. And we also show at the bottom here the picture of the other legacy project we're working on, which is Remembrance Park. And so one of the things we did as part of the Plymouth 400 committee was we said we're going to have literally hundreds of events. We're going to have a lot of tourists in town, but we wanted to leave one stake in the ground so that when all the commemorative events have gone, and we didn't realize they were going to go up in smoke, but when all they were done, we would have one place where people would say, oh, this is what happened in 2020. And so we bought some land. We have some land, and originally it was going to be called Quadricennial Park, but we changed the name to Remembrance Park. And the purpose of Remembrance Park, other than to put a stake in the ground for 2020, was going to commemorate the 50 pilgrims that died in 1620, 1621. But I think more importantly, it was going to commemorate the Wampanoag dying from 1613 to 1616. And what happened in 1613 is the natives in Maine caught some kind of a disease from the European fishermen. And there's still a debate about exactly what that disease was, but we know the result. The population of the Wampanoags in this whole area was about 200,000 at the time. And as a result of this plague, 75,000 people died. So this park is going to commemorate those dyings, both the Pilgrim dying and the Wampanoag dying. And so I think that's an important part of the legacy we want to leave. The good news is we own the land. We had the park designed, and then you can't do anything up on Coles Hill until you do an archaeological dig. So we paid the University of Massachusetts in Boston to do an archaeological dig, which they finished about 3 or 4 months ago, and we now have the final report in our hands. But the very, very good news is underneath that site, they found the remains of a native settlement. Not just a few bones and a few arrowheads, but the actual native settlement dating back 4,000 years. And this is only the second time in all of New England they found artifacts of a complete settlement. So having that in hand, well, a little bit of bad news, the archaeological dig found the best remains right under where we were going to put the sidewalk. So we can't use the design that we had paid for. And, you know, unfortunately, again, that's money that we'll never see again. The only revenue we get right now is revenue from the renewal of the license plates, which is not a lot of money. It's $2,000 or $3,000 a month. It's not insignificant, but it's not an awful lot of money, and we still have to pay the people that did the archaeological dig, so there's a little bit of liability there. So we're going through the process now of trying to figure out what we do exactly on that site. So there's more to come on that, and one of the things we're talking about is trying to do something related to the archaeological find of a 4,000-year-old settlement. There's only, as I mentioned, 2 that were ever found in New England, and there is really no place in all of New England which features that kind of detail and commemorates the loss of 75,000 lives. The other thing we're working on is that when we close down the Plymouth 400 office, I wound up with a lot of paperwork and stuff that should be archived, which is now in boxes in my basement. In addition to that, as part of closing down that operation, I rounded up other piece of things that existed in Plymouth, and part of that's in my basement too. There's one item here, if you look on the bottom, some of the artifacts we have from that 400 commemoration is first day of issue cancellations, in this case, showing the Mayflower stamp, postage stamp, which we had done. The post office made 28 million of those, and they were sold out within a year and a half. This particular envelope has that stamp on it, but it also shows the commemorative coins that were produced by the U.S. Mint in 2020. The third picture in the middle shows a banner that was put up in front of Main Street Extension Post Office, which has the Plymouth 400 logo on the top, and it shows directions to various things that exist in town for the tourists. I have a request in with the Department of Public Works to take that down and put it in the archives also. So we're working with Connor Anderson at the town hall here to try and figure out what is the best location for all these items. And it's certainly not my basement. I've lost how to get on with this here. One of the other things we've done is during the Plymouth 400 is we had an illumination event every year in honor of various people that contributed things to the community. And so we're resurrecting that particular project on an annual basis now, and we're beginning this Friday, which is tomorrow, to honor Ken Travaris with the One Small Candle Award. And this will be an annual event from now on. So anybody that has some time on their hands and $20 can go to this event tomorrow. And then lastly, and incidentally, one of the things we did back in 2016 was we had a bookmark produced that showed the postage stamps that were done in 1920, showing the Mayflower at sea, the Mayflower landing, and the signing of the Mayflower Compact. And on the reverse of that bookmark, we showed the postage stamp that was done by the UK in 1970, and under that was the postage stamp that was done by the U.S. Postal Service in 1970. And at the bottom of that, it said, please write to the Postal Service and have them do a stamp or a series of stamps for 2020. And so, as I just said earlier, they produced one stamp showing the Mayflower in Plymouth Harbor, and they produced 28 million of those. And then I took that and replaced the verbiage on the back of the other, the initial bookmark with that. And then at the bottom, I also took a stamp from the Isle of Man that shows the first Thanksgiving. And that's available now at every public library in Plymouth, and it's available in the Kingston Library. It will be available soon at the school libraries, and it will just be available for public consumption.
And it's available right in front of you.
Yeah,
so,
and everybody here has
yeah.
a copy. So. Anyway, the other thing which we're continuing to do is we have a license plate frame. And these are still available for people that don't want to get a Plymouth license plate because they already have a specialty license plate, but they can get these as a wraparound to the specialty license plate they have. And this promotes Plymouth, Massachusetts, America's story, a national legacy. So anyways, anybody have any questions? I probably went longer than I should have.
Sure. Any questions for Mr. McKay? Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Thank you for the mailing you sent out, too, that I now have a commemorative stamp of the Thanksgiving, so thank you for that. Also, where do I purchase one of those license plate frames?
I have these on eBay,
Okay.
so you can go into eBay and find one.
And just search for a Plymouth
Yeah, you
license.
should be able to. And then I have a few left that I give away to people at special events where I have a large crowd, so.
Very good.
Dale hold a special event.
Precinct 3 meets on December 5th.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think somebody's going to get one of these tomorrow.
We will get that onto eBay, but thank you for that. Thank you for your work.
All right, thank you for your time.
Mr. McKay, thank you for your hard work in continuing on the Plymouth 400. We all know what happened in 2020. But to continue on and in this transition to the Plymouth 400 legacy, as it's now known, and in the promotion of Plymouth through all these different events. I'll echo Mr. Weber's statement. It was awesome to see the first holiday card of the year already in my mailbox, so I appreciate that, and I recognized the handwriting right away. I knew where it came from. Are there any other questions or comments for Mr. McKay?
Congratulations to your father.
Oh, I will pass that along. Thank you. All right, moving along to, I see Mr. LaFrari joined us, so you are up for a quick town meeting handbook update as to where you are, your next meeting, et cetera.
Matthew, excuse me. It's Frank O'Brien, Precinct 11.
Oh, okay, I saw Carmen joined. Go ahead, Mr. O'Brien.
Carmen is online, but he can't speak at the moment. He texted me his update. If you don't mind, I'd like to read it.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. O'Brien.
Okay. According to Carmen, I quote, "We are waiting for info from the town hall, and our next meeting is being scheduled for after Thanksgiving. We are in its final stages."
Okay.
That's it. Apparently Carmen is traveling right at the moment. He's listening in, but he doesn't want to start talking into a speaker while he's driving up Route 95. So,
All right, thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Alan, I'm sure it's going to be a quick one with just coming out of town meeting, but...
Yeah, very short. As a matter of fact, we haven't met during the town meeting process, but I'll get together with the new administrator, and we'll get a meeting scheduled for the first week in December and get back on track, and I'll have a report at our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Costello. That brings us over to any new business before the committee, or would anyone like to raise any new business? Not seeing any. Any old business? Continuing on, we are in public comment. There is no one in the room. I'm sure they're all watching at home, and we have a few online. If there's any public online that would like to speak, please raise your hand. Well, Catherine, you have your hand raised, but you're a committee member, so, or are you speaking as a public comment?
I couldn't get off mute early enough. Did you talk about when our next meeting is going to be in new business yet?
No, you're
Or is
jumping
off?
ahead.
Am I? All right, thanks.
Yeah. It's literally the next item after public comment. So thanks for keeping me moving, Catherine. Seeing no public comment, just a couple announcements. First, our next meeting will be January 16th. No meeting in the month of December. That'll allow a couple of the subcommittees to meet as well. Gives them an extra night to work on that. But that being said, I'd like to just make you all aware, the presentation from the town manager on the budget is December 17th with the select board. In February, you're going to start seeing the Abercrombie, excuse me, I'm reading A&F and went back to my childhood there for a minute. The advisory and finance public meeting on February 19th. Now, the reason why I point that out is town meeting is on April 5th. So plan to have 2 meetings in March and at least a meeting in February, if not 2, dependent upon what we have before us or that kind of comes out of the budgetary process. We did use 4 to go into this fall town meeting, but for some reason, I'm looking at this timeline and looking at the calendar. We're I feel even more condensed than before. We're not. It's just the way things are lining up with weekdays and when the meeting is. So I just want everyone to kind of mentally prepare for a couple of grueling sessions So again, our next meeting is January 16th. I'd like to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, and it's also recognize that it's also the National Day of Mourning here in Plymouth. And with that being said, I take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Brewster, seconded by Mr. Delafield. All those in favor? All right, happy Thanksgiving, everyone.